Okay, here's number 11. G of x and h of x are inverses with g of 3 equal negative 5 and g prime of 3 equal 2. What is h prime of negative 5? So there's really not a lot of algebra or anything to do here, but you have to try to picture what's going on and really think about the situation. And I think the best way to picture it is actually draw a picture probably. So that's what I'm going to do. At least for me, I really like to do things visually. That's why I'm going to do it. G of 3 equals negative 5. That means the point 3, negative 5 is on the G graph. So that's the G graph. Goes through the point 3, negative 5. And they tell us that G prime of 3 equals 2. G prime of 3 equals 2. So what does that tell us? If G prime of 3 equals 2, what's that tell us about this point right here?
Slope is 2.
Slope is 2, right? So G prime of 3 equals 2. That tells me that the slope of the G graph at x equals 3 equals 2. And G of 3 equal 5 tells me that the graph goes through the point 3, 5. Now we know that G and H are inverses of each other. This is our G of x graph down here. So if they're inverses, what other point would I know would be on H of x, the inverse of G of x? 3, negative 5. Negative 5, 3. So negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. I know that that point is going to be on the H of x graph. The question they're asking here is, what is H prime of negative 5? H prime of negative 5 equals blank. That's the question. So really what they're asking me for, whoops, I got these backwards. They're really asking me, what's the derivative of H at negative 5? Anybody tell me? 1/2. It's just going to be the reciprocal. Remember that when you're looking at graphs and their inverses, their x and y coordinates get switched, which means their slopes get flipped. So this slope is going to be 1/2. And that's your answer for number 11. It's going to just be the reciprocal of the slope that they gave you in the problem. They gave you 2, so the reciprocal would be 1/2. So that's 11. Now let me talk about 10. 10 talks about a vertical tangent. Haven't talked about this a lot in the past, so I want to make sure I go over one. Number 10, at what point on the curve is the tangent line vertical? And the curve they give you is x cubed minus y squared plus x squared equals 0. So you do the derivative of x cubed would be 3x squared. The derivative of y squared would be 2y times dy over dx. The derivative of x squared is 2x. The derivative of 0 would be 0. Now I'm going to subtract 3x squared over, subtract the 2x over. That would leave me with this. Negative 2y dy over dx equals negative 3x squared minus 2x. I'm going to divide by negative 2y on both sides. That'll give me a derivative. Dy over dx equals negative 3x squared minus 2x, all divided by negative 2y. So there's my derivative. That gives me the slope of the tangent line. This problem says the tangent line is vertical. What is the slope on a vertical line? Right, vertical line is undefined slope. So it's going to have an undefined derivative. How can a fraction be undefined?
The bottom 0.
Right, the bottom's got to be 0. If this is going to be undefined, negative 2y has to equal 0. Which means y has to equal what? 0. Y has to equal 0. So that doesn't do me a lot of good, because if you look at your choices A, B, and D all have y coordinates of 0, but at least you can cross off C now. Okay? Cross off C. Because C has a y coordinate of negative 2, and I know the y coordinate's got to be 0 in order for the slope of the tangent line to be undefined. Now the next thing is, okay, if the y coordinate's 0, what points on the graph have a y coordinate of 0? Well, the way you figure that out is you plug 0 in for y in the original equation and then solve for x. So I don't know see how much room I have on my screen here. Move this over a little bit. So So where on this graph is the y coordinate 0? Well, just plug 0 in, so you'd have x cubed minus 0 squared plus x squared equals 0. So that's x cubed plus x squared equals 0. So now you got to figure out what x values would make this come out to 0. I think 0 and negative 1, but here's a way you, if you can't just see it, because sometimes it's kind of hard to see it, factor. Factor out x squared out of both of these. Which would leave you with x plus 1. Now, if either part of this is multiplication, if either part of this equals 0, the whole thing will be 0. So either x squared could equal 0, or x plus 1 could equal 0. So here x would equal 0. Here x would equal negative 1. And we already figured out earlier that y equals 0. So those are 2 points that are on the curve that would have undefined slope, which means they have a vertical tangent line. So the answer for number 10 is D as in dog. We got about 15 minutes left. Anything else you guys want to